and thank you for tuning in to this CGTN live stream. I'm your host, Tianran, and tonight we have come to see a very spectacular, very unique kind of firework display. We've come to Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers from Beijing here in northern China, to witness a 500-year-old tradition called Da Shu Hua. Now, Da Shu Hua translates to beating tree flowers, and the reason being, Nuanquan used to be a garrison that formed a part of a defensive system for Beijing, and it defended the imperial capital against Mongols. Now, obviously, because this was such an important town, there were many blacksmiths here making weapons for the military and also farming equipment for locals. And as they worked on their metal work, sparks would occasionally be seen to fall to the ground, and people saw these sparks and they thought that they were very beautiful. And over time, people asked blacksmiths whether it was possible to produce these sparks on a bigger scale. Now, these sparks later on became known as poor man's fireworks, because over the Chinese New Year Spring Festival period, people who couldn't afford fireworks would bring scrap iron to blacksmiths and ask them to melt it down. And with this molten iron, they would bring a 1600 degrees Celsius pot of molten iron, very hot, that's hotter than lava, and literally throw the molten iron onto the walls of the city gates, which will result in a very beautiful, gorgeous display of sparks showering everyone in a very beautiful canopy of fireworks. And the show that we'll be watching later on will not only encompass Da Shu Hua, but also many performances of folk customs here in Nuanquan. Now, if you're not very familiar with Spring Festival, I'll give you a quick primer. Spring Festival is known in China as Chunjie, and abroad it's also known as Chinese New Year. Now, while we have a 7-week holiday period here in China, the actual Spring Festival period goes on for about 2 weeks and culminates in the Lantern Festival, which is typically on the 15th day of the first lunar month. And I'll probably have to give you a bit of an idea of what a lunar month is first. So in the West we use a Gregorian calendar, which is based off the sun cycles, right? So New Year's is always on the 1st of January. However, China uses a lunar solar calendar, which takes into account both the movement of the sun and also the moon. And that's why Chinese New Year always falls on different dates. This time round, it's in February, and the last day, the last festival in the Chinese New Year period is Lantern Festival. Here in the north, though, people tend to celebrate Shu Hua Festival, which is a celebration of earth and fire. They pray to the god of earth for a good harvest, and also to the god of fire, who enables us to keep warm and cook. Now, Da Shu Hua is always performed on the 14th, 15th and 16th days of the first lunar month. That is the 3 days in and around Lantern Festival. Now, I think we should probably sit down first, because the festival is about to begin, and whether you're watching us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Weibo, and of course our very own CGTN app, do make sure to write into us and leave comments. Let us know how you're enjoying the performance. If there's any questions you'd like to ask about what Da Shu Hua is, or any of the performances we'll be watching very shortly, do write into us. The atmosphere is already getting pretty lively. As you can see, I'm dressed up pretty warm. It's about -5 right now here in northern China, so you guys watching at home, you have it good. But of course, with the firework display coming on later on, it's going to get a lot warmer. There is already a slight hint of smoke in the air from the molten iron that they've been preparing backstage. And do make sure to watch to the end of our live stream, because we will be taking you back to where they are making the molten iron in the furnace right behind the screen. And it is an incredible sight, because it is iron that's being melted at a temperature of 1600 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than lava. And they have to prepare it for about half an hour before the performance, in order for the iron to completely melt. And once the performance starts, you'll be seeing gentlemen wearing, I believe they're straw hats actually, and sheepskin coats, and carrying these barrows full of molten iron and spraying it onto that wall right in front of us. It is quite an incredible display. Sure. day, I think, are about to begin. So we have a number of performances first. The first performance is going to be a sort of a contemporary dance and musical number, also showcasing the song and folk traditions of people here in Nuanquan, here in northern China. And if you're just tuning in, we are live from the town of Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers away from Beijing, here in northern China, where we will be very shortly witnessing an incredible display of pyrotechnics, because here in Nuanquan they have a 500-year-old tradition called Da Shu Hua, which literally translates to beating tree flowers. And the reason it's called beating tree flowers is because blacksmiths will be throwing molten iron onto the very cold wall right in front of us, and when the molten iron hits the wall, there will be a collision causing thousands of sparks to go flying across the blacksmith's head, which would look like a canopy of flowers, hence the name. Now, this profession is 500-year-old, but it's also very dangerous because the molten iron gets heated up to a very high degree. And the reason the tradition came about was because Nuanquan used to be a garrison town that defended Beijing from Mongol invaders. It was a part of a defensive system. And as such, there are many blacksmiths here in Nuanquan working on weapons for the military, tools for locals, and as they would work on metal, sparks would come out, which would later be turned into fireworks. But first, we'll watch a short performance of some traditions that they have here in Nuanquan that they put on for the Shu Hua festival. You see a gentleman over there drumming on what is a gigantic drum, and poor guy, he's pretty much just wearing a vest. It is currently about -5 degrees, so even though we are freezing here, he's definitely full of vigor and energy, drumming away to bring in the beginning of this Da Shu Hua performance. So it's a little bit cold right now. What a fantastic way to begin the performance, though. So if you're not familiar with Chinese New Year, let me just give you a bit of a little bit of a background information. So in China, Chinese New Year is called Chunjie, which literally translates as Spring Festival. Now, everyone gets 7 days off. It's a national holiday, but the Chinese New Year period is in fact roughly 2 weeks and culminates in the Lantern Festival. However, here in northern China, they celebrate a different kind of festival. They celebrate Shu Hua, which literally translates as celebrating the gods of earth and fire, because China is an agrarian society, and in the past people had to live off the land. So worshipping the god of earth was to ensure a good harvest for the new year, and worshipping the god of fire, well, fire keeps us warm and also enables us to cook. Now, Shu Hua has many different ways of being celebrated here in northern China, and one of the ways to celebrate Shu Hua here is Da Shu Hua. Da Shu Hua is performed on the 14th, 15th and 16th days of the first lunar month. During this time, a lot of floats come out into the streets, a lot of performances. It's a little bit like a New Year's parade, and Da Shu Hua is one of the highlights, and it used to be called poor man's fireworks because Da Shu Hua is made of molten iron. Now the reason being is Nuanquan used to be a garrison defending Beijing, the imperial capital, from Mongols to the north, and there were a lot of blacksmiths in the town who would make metal tools, weapons for the military, and as such there would be sparks falling to the ground, which people thought were very beautiful. And come Chinese New Year, people who couldn't afford fireworks would bring scrap iron to blacksmiths and ask them to melt it down, and then the blacksmiths, very brave souls, would bring bucketfuls of the molten iron and literally throw it onto the wall. For example, that wall right in front of us, from which thousands of sparks would be produced, creating a very gorgeous display of pyrotechnics, which I think honestly is just as good, maybe even better than modern fireworks. Currently we're watching a performance with many different folk song and dance numbers here in Nuanquan, and later on, after this is finished, we'll get our first glimpse of how Da Shu Hua, how molten iron fireworks looks, and I can assure you it is a brilliant display. And of course, we are currently live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Weibo, and of course our very own CGTN app. And please do write into us, comment on what you're seeing right now, if there's anything you'd like to ask us. And as I understand, there is a viewer that's just written into us. If I can just get it again, I'll try my best to explain what's going on. If we could get the comment from the fan. I'm sure there are many, many things that you would all like to ask us. I'll do my best within my knowledge to tell you all. So we've got a comment coming in from one of our social media platforms. I'm just waiting to hear back from them. There are a lot of people here right now, so the signal can occasionally be a little bit slower. Can you give that again? In the meantime, so if you're just tuning in, we are in the town of Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers away here in northern China. 300 kilometers away from Beijing here in northern China, and we're about to witness an incredible display of ancient fireworks called Da Shu Hua. It's a 500-year-old tradition here, which literally translates as beating tree flowers. Currently, we're watching a performance that showcases many different folk dances and songs here in Nuanquan. And if you can see in the distance, there are already a couple of gentlemen holding a barrow full of molten iron. You can already see sparks falling out. They're getting ready, and these gentlemen are very brave indeed. They're wearing what is basically just a straw hat and sheepskin coats for protection. There's no safety goggles, and there's nothing else that's inflammable that they're wearing. It's an ancient tradition, and they're also wearing very old forms of protection as well. And later on, we will go backstage to ask them what everything is about. But right now, you want to keep your eyes glued on what's about to happen in front of us. So, Da Shu Hua this molten iron firework display. It's a 500-year-old tradition, and it's also an intangible cultural heritage. And the gentlemen who are performing this spectacular feat are very brave indeed. Many of them have been performing this particular molten iron firework display for decades. For the molten iron to make this incredible display, it has to be heated up to 1600 degrees Celsius, that's 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than lava, obviously. Actually, to be honest, at first I was very surprised at the temperature because, you know, you think lava is extremely hot, but obviously in order for iron to melt, the temperature has to be even higher. And the physics behind what you're seeing is due to the fact that the molten iron is very quickly being cooled down when it hits the icy walls in front of us, and that's why you have this beautiful, beautiful reaction. And if you are just tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook or Weibo or Twitter, and of course our very own CGTN app, you're currently witnessing the molten iron firework display that's famous here in Nuanquan town, some 300 kilometers away from Beijing. This is called Da Shu Hua, which literally translates as beating tree flowers. And this is also not only beautiful, but very strenuous, because the gentlemen over there are ladling molten iron that's been melted down. And I'm told that in order to create enough molten iron for the fireworks, they have to melt down several hundred kilograms worth of iron. However, in the past, these fireworks were called a poor man's firework display because people who couldn't afford fireworks over the Chinese New Year period would give scrap iron to blacksmiths to melt down in order to recreate this very own display. What a fantastic experience. Currently, we're going to let the blacksmiths go have a bit of a rest, and later on they'll come out again. We'll be going backstage to ask them what exactly has to go into the whole Da Shu Hua experience. Right now, we'll be watching a performance of local customs and traditions here in Nuanquan, things that people do in order to celebrate the Shu Hua festival, which people celebrate instead of the Lantern Festival here in northern China. And if you don't know what the Lantern Festival is, now probably have to give you a bit of a primer on the Chinese New Year in general. China uses what's known as a lunar solar calendar. Now in the West people use the Gregorian calendar, which is based off the sun, so New Year's is always the 1st of January. However, in China, the lunar solar calendar is based off both the movements of the sun and also the moon, which is why Chinese New Year always lands on different dates. And here in China, the Chinese New Year Spring Festival period is actually a 7-day holiday. If only it was a 7-week holiday. However, Chinese New Year actually lasts for 2 weeks and culminates in the Lantern Festival. However, here in the north, people celebrate Shu Hua instead, which translates to a festival of earth and fire. Does sound a little bit like something from George R. R. Martin's books. And they celebrate earth because China used to be an agrarian society. Earth was worshipped in order to obtain a good harvest for the new year, and fire is worshipped in order, because fire keeps us warm, it also helps us cook. So as part of the Shu Hua celebrations, we'll often see people wearing land boats. These are actually called Tianran. You can also translate them as dry boats, and they're meant to symbolize going out to sea, also getting a good harvest. It's also great fun. There's usually one person in the boat and one person as the captain. The person in the boat is an oarsman or as it seems in this situation, it's an oars woman, and the person in the back is the captain helping to drive the boat around. This is not just seen here in Nuanquan, but also quite often seen across northern China. And at this stage, I'd like to take you all backstage to where our blacksmiths are busy making another batch of molten iron. And as we make our way back, I just want to clarify again that this molten iron fireworks display is actually a specialty of Nuanquan. It can be found nowhere else in China. And as we're coming in here, you can see these gentlemen. You can see these gentlemen holding a dragon as well. So they'll be performing a dragon dance. You've probably seen those before elsewhere as well. Dragons are symbols of auspiciousness in China, and as opposed to symbols of ferocious mythical creatures in the West that possibly burn down houses, Chinese dragons are symbols of power, of strength, of great fortune, and also they were the symbol of the emperor. So having a dragon dance would always bring great fortune and luck to whoever witnesses it. So I'd like to bring everyone up here, if we'd just like to watch our steps, backstage to where these gentlemen are the performers who will be going on stage shortly to throw these molten iron fireworks. So this is where the magic happens. Within that furnace, the scrap iron that you see over there on the right hand side is being shoveled in, melted down in that furnace, heated up with coal, and typically they need about 30 minutes in order for all of the iron to melt down. It is extremely hot, 1600 degrees Celsius, that's 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lava. And very shortly after this dragon dance is finished, we will be watching these gentlemen bring up the molten iron, throwing it onto the wall over there. Right now, I would actually like to interview this gentleman here. Oh, sorry, I found the wrong gentleman. Well, we will find our interviewee shortly after they're done with the performance. And if you're just turning in, we're currently live from Nuanquan, 300 kilometers away from Beijing here in northern China, to witness an incredible firework display called Shu Hua, which is a 500-year-old tradition which literally translates to beating tree flowers for the beautiful sparks that it produces. Right behind us earlier we saw people burning molten iron, which will very shortly be brought up. These gentlemen have just finished performing lion dance, and also the little figurines that you saw earlier are supposed to be children, and they put on a performance that is commonly seen over the Shu Hua festival, which is celebrated over the Chinese New Year period instead of the Lantern Festival here in northern China. Now, you've already seen these gentlemen bring down that bucket. They will very shortly be pouring the molten iron inside and bringing it up on stage. So we had a comment earlier from one of our viewers, don't these gentlemen get burned from throwing, it's very hot, from throwing these bucketfuls of molten iron? Now that is a question I'd also like to ask, and we will be interviewing one of the gentlemen later on, but I can tell you that despite wearing these straw hats, and these gentlemen are not wearing it, but you can also see people wearing sheepskin jackets. There's a specific reason for wearing that. Also, later on, because we're backstage, we'll be very, very close to the molten iron sparks. You will see sparks falling on me too, but not to worry, I won't get burnt. By the time that the sparks have formed and come down from the wall over here, they would have cooled down enough to not pose any physical harm to any of us. However, if they land on clothing, well, then I guess I may need to get a new coat. Wow. So as you can see, this gentleman, he's wearing a straw hat, sheepskin coat, and that's all he's wearing. That's all the protection he needs. What a spectacular display. I am extremely close to these sparks. They're falling all around me. One of them just went onto the microphone, but as you can see, it's fine. There's no danger here. By the time it reaches us, it's already cooled down. And the spoon that they use to throw the molten iron is made of willow, which has been soaked in water for several days and then dried using a low fire in order for it to not be burnt. And the amount of iron that they need to melt down in order to produce enough molten iron to throw onto the wall is several hundred kilograms. So this is also a very strenuous physical activity, and of course you need a special technique if you don't want to get burnt with your hands. If you throw it in the wrong way, you don't want a ladleful of molten iron landing on you. Oh, there's a lot of smoke coming in our direction. I guess that's what happens when you play with molten iron. I think one of our commenters is asking if I'm enjoying the day. Yes, for sure. It is extremely cold. It's -5 right now, as you can probably tell by how I'm dressed. But it is incredible to be so close to these molten iron fireworks and also watch this fantastic performance. They basically have condensed all of the many different forms of dance and song numbers that they perform over the Shu Hua festival into a nice 1-hour performance. So if you don't have time to spend walking around the streets of Nuanquan here in northern China, you can just come here and watch the festival, watch the performance to get an idea of just how amazing and colourful Shu Hua festival is. So I would actually like to interview Mr. Wang De over here. If you could come over. Wang De, 你好。你好，您现在有空吗？有。哎，好了好了。So Mr. Wang De here is a intangible cultural heritage inheritor who's been performing the molten iron fireworks for 您做这个打树花已经几十年了呀？30多年了。已经30多 for over 30 years。您最早是怎么开始玩打树花的呀？
我最早是在小的时候，经常看那个老人打树花，看他以后是比较刺激，比较好玩，后来以后就上去就学会了。
Okay, so he said that he watched people doing molten iron fireworks from a young age, and he thought that it was a fun thing to do and exhilarating. I would definitely say it's an adrenaline rush throwing molten iron onto the wall. But what I'm most interested in is his outfit and what it does to protect him from the molten iron. 您可以跟我们讲一下，就是您的这个装备是怎么能防着火？
咱们这个草帽，它戴着以后护着这个脖子，它那个铁水进不了脖子。
但是这个草帽不会燃火，不会着火。
这个草帽它是钢簧的，铁水掉上面以后，它就自然就掉下来。还有这个羊皮袄反穿，因为这个羊毛它沾火不着，不起明火。穿它以后保护这个。
So despite it being a straw hat, it's actually got a coating over it that prevents it from setting on fire, and the woolen coat also, it may sizzle a bit, but it will never catch fire, and also he's got wrist guards to protect himself as well. 然而这个您的勺子应该是专门的一种木头是吧？
对，这个勺子是柳木的。
柳木。
专门用柳木刻的。
为什么不用别的
木头？别的木头。比如咱们那个松木呀什么的，它一燃，它找这个柳木比较有韧性。做好这个勺子以后，再打的时候提前浸泡3天3夜，泡好以后里面全部进合水了，再打的时候再把这个外表口干，它里面还有水分， 它就比较耐用。
So the reason that willow wood is used instead of pine wood is because it's very absorbent. This spoon has been soaking in water for 3 days, and despite the outer part of the spoon being pretty charred, the inside still is quite moist, which prevents it from setting on fire. But I'm also interested in any injuries that Mr. Wang De may have. 您打树花打了有30多年，有没有受过伤？
经常受伤，
经常受伤。
对，这个身上、腿上、胳膊上，到处都有。
但是您既然还会继续打，
对对对，这样坚持下来，
就是因为刺激。
因为刺激好玩。现在在打的时候，这个观众掌声呐喊声比较激烈，什么外国的，咱们全国各地的游客都来观看，所以打的时候比较高兴。
So Mr. Wang De, despite sustaining many injuries over the decades, he still continues to do 打树花, these molten iron fireworks, because he likes the excitement, the thrill of doing molten iron fireworks, and also with such a great energetic audience, it makes him feel even better in his line of work. 那您做这个打树花有没有一些技巧？因为拿这个勺子也不大。 然后呢，您扔的时候是不是也有专门的姿势、专门的手势？要不然很容易就会洒到身上去。
对，这个必须掌握好这个角度，还有这个臂力，还有腕力，都有一定的技术。
您可以给我们演示一下吗？
咱们
So he's going to show us how he performs, obviously without the molten iron. 就是这样子蒯一下 so the spoon must be facing up as you're putting it inside the molten iron because you don't want it to be leaking anywhere, obviously. 然后之后就往上一扔，不是
它跟那个城墙上碰撞，越用力碰撞越花多好看。
扔的时候是把胳膊放在前面，胸前，不要在头上面，是吧？这样子容易洒到身上，是吧 ？So. Something that is very important to know when you're throwing it. Actually, don't try this at home, but I'm just giving a bit of an explanation. When you're throwing the molten iron, your arm must go in front of your chest, not over your head, because then the molten iron will go directly onto you. And despite wearing the bamboo hat and the sheepskin coat, you're still probably going to get burnt. 那您这个打树花，因为这个沸点是需要30分钟才能化出来的。
对对对。
大概其有几百公斤沸水。
咱们这个沸铁打的时候，每一场1000斤半吨。
So 500 kilograms of scrap iron go into making the molten iron, and it's all heated up to 1600 degrees Celsius with coal. Right now, they're still heating up more. 咱们现在是马上就做完了吗？还希望继续？
现在这个节目完了以后，马上就开始表演。
您是马上就要上去表演？
对对，马上就开始表演。
然后我记得我之前好几年前就见过您在做这个打树花。对。您有没有教别的一些徒弟？
现在还没有。现在在去年，前年。我儿子已经教会了。
您的儿子也学？
我儿子现在已经学会了。
是他想学还是您？
他也想学，是我也让他学。
So Mr. Wang De is of course ensuring that there is a successor to the molten iron fireworks. His son is also picking up the bucketfuls of molten iron in order to continue the 打树花 tradition. 他现在多大了？您的儿子？
现在我儿子已经20多岁了。
20多岁。
对。
您开始学打树花的时候是？
我也是20多岁。
也是20多岁。
对。
因为小孩的时候，肯定小孩扔的就很不安全，而且也没有这个体力。
他现在已经学会了，学会不过是现在他还没干这些工作，他还在那边干别的打工呢。
现在打树花只是在暖泉吗？还是？
对，就在我们暖泉。
咱们这个打树花的技巧是不是 我听说是只是暖泉人才能吃。
对，只有我们村，我们北关古村。
是一个秘密。
对对对，只有我们。
So they have a secret technique to not only making the molten iron but also performing the molten iron fireworks, and it's only passed on to those who live in Nuanquan, those who are Nuanquan people. So unfortunately, as much as I want to learn this exhilarating performance, there's no way for me to become a successor of this intangible cultural heritage. 那好，那谢谢王老师，那就您就先忙，然后一会儿我们就期待您的表演。好，谢谢谢谢。He is definitely a very brave man. I mean, just standing here, we already managed to get a number of sparks landing on us. But he is right underneath that wall. Thousands of sparks falling on him every day. And over these 3 days, before, during, and after Lantern Festival, the Da Shu Hua performance is performed every day. And after, between May and October, it's also performed every night, every Friday night as well. So even if you don't manage to come here in winter, you'll still be able to catch this molten iron performance if you come to China or come to Nuanquan between the months of May to October. Now, they'll very shortly be bringing up their last bucketful of molten iron, and we will get, I believe, the last performance of this amazing firework display tonight. So I'm just reading on my phone, we have a couple more comments from our viewers at home. How much preparation does it take to make the fireworks happen? Do they start preparing iron during the day? Well, actually, in order to make the molten iron, they start preparing about 30 minutes in advance, heating the coals up to a temperature of 1600 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than lava in order to create this molten iron. And in the process, they'll end up using about 500 kilograms of scrap iron. And for those of you at home who are just tuning in, you are very lucky because this is the last performance of the night of the Da Shu Hua molten iron fireworks. Currently, we are in the town of Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers to the north of Beijing, here in northern China. And Da Shu Hua is a 500-year-old tradition only found here in Nuanquan. Now, originally, Nuanquan was a garrison town defending the imperial capital of Beijing from Mongol invaders, so they had many blacksmiths who worked on weapons for the military. And as they worked, often beautiful sparks would fall to the ground. And later on, this act of throwing molten iron onto a cold wall became known as Da Shu Hua, and also known as poor man's fireworks, because those who couldn't afford normal fireworks to set off during Chinese New Year would ask blacksmiths, give them scrap iron to perform this amazing display. We are backstage, so we are closer to these molten iron sparks than anyone else. It does look very intimidating. I've had a number of sparks fall on me already, but don't worry, these are quite harmless. And the reason being, I think my gloves were smoking a little bit earlier. It's a little bit like an adult version of daring someone to get as close to the fire as possible. So these molten iron fireworks behind me, before being thrown up, were 1600 degrees. I'm going to come a little bit closer to you guys because we are very, very close to the action. Gentleman here has molten iron inside a bucket. It's actually so hot. I feel like it's almost as bright as the sun. It's getting quite painful to look at the molten iron. And this is a relatively dangerous... sorry, we're getting some comments from our viewers at home. So this particular performance is performed on the 14th, 15th and 16th days of the first lunar month. So the days before, during and after Lantern Festival. However, if you weren't able to come here during this festival period because it's very cold right now, you can also come during summer and autumn. From the months of May to October, they'll be performing this every Friday night. So you can also watch this in the comfort of sitting back there in the audience in your t-shirts and shorts from a very safe distance. But I believe coming back here is probably, and also watching this live with us backstage is probably as close as you'll get, and probably the best experience of the Shu Hua molten iron fireworks. And of course, this is also a very strenuous activity. 500 kilograms of scrap iron was melted down in order to create the molten iron, and you have to continuously fling it up onto the wall and of course make sure that you are safe while you are throwing the molten iron as well. Earlier we interviewed Mr. Wang De, inheritor of the intangible cultural heritage of Shu Hua, and he showed us the ways in which you are supposed to hold the ladle in order to make sure that none of the molten iron, none of the sparks fall upon yourself. And there's also many different ways of throwing the molten iron to create this beautiful display. You throw it in an arc, you don't throw it straight up, you don't throw it diagonally. You want to create as big of an impression as possible when the molten iron lands on this cold wall. We had a comment from one of our viewers earlier named Sudipto Roy. Sorry if I've pronounced that badly. What we just saw happening was a display of molten iron fireworks called Shu Hua. It's a 500-year-old tradition here in the town of Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers away from Beijing in northern China, and used to be called poor man's fireworks because Nuanquan was home to many blacksmiths who made weapons for the military. Nuanquan was a garrison town that helped protect the imperial capital of Beijing from Mongol invaders, and as they worked on their metal tools, sparks would often be seen falling to the ground, and people realized that these sparks were very beautiful, and later on blacksmiths devised a way to throw these ladlefuls of molten iron to create a pyrotechnic display, and those who couldn't afford normal fireworks during Chinese New Year would ask blacksmiths, give them scrap iron, and ask them to throw these ladlefuls of molten iron onto the wall to create a poor man's fireworks. That's where it gets their name. Currently, we have some more performances showcasing different folk song and dance numbers from this part of northern China. what we're currently watching is a performance of military might. So these performers are from the, I believe it was the Dai kingdom that used to be in this part of China some several thousand years ago. And this is a bit of an interpretation of their military accomplishments. Earlier it was the army heading out for a battle, and now it's the army returning victorious. I'm just reading a comment from one of our viewers at home. Does anyone clean this wall after the festival, or does it look like it's been stir-fried all year? That is a very good question. I do believe it's stir-fried all year, especially since they are going to be throwing molten iron repeatedly onto this same wall pretty much all year round. They do the molten iron firework display on the 3 days before, during and after Lantern Festival, which is today, tomorrow and the next day. And they also perform Da Shu Hua, the molten iron fireworks, from May to October, every Friday night. You can also come here and watch this amazing display. And if you are just tuning in to our live stream, we are currently in the town of Nuanquan, some 300 kilometers away from Beijing, here in northern China, to witness a spectacular pyrotechnic display. Currently we have a performance of a historic kingdom that used to be in this region called the Dai Kingdom. It used to be here several thousand years ago. After this performance, we will have our last Da Shu Hua, our last molten iron firework display. Now the reason it's called Da Shu Hua, which translates as beating tree flowers, is when molten iron is thrown onto this giant wall that you see in front of you, it causes an incredible display of sparks being produced and showering all of the performers in what is basically a waterfall of sparks. And it looks beautiful, like a canopy of flowers on a tree. We are currently backstage though, and I see in front of me a bucket full of molten iron and the performers waiting on standby, getting ready to get up on stage. If you saw earlier, these performers are actually just wearing straw hats and sheepskin coats. Now, despite looking very flammable, there are specific reasons why they wear this outfit. The straw hat has a layer that prevents it from catching fire, whereas the wool coat may sizzle, but it will never catch fire. Also, the spoon, the ladle in which they place the molten iron, is made of willow, which is more absorbent than other forms of wood, such as pine. And the spoon is soaked for 3 days in water, and while the outside of the spoon may be charred because of the molten iron, the inside remains moist, so that it will never catch fire. We are standing right next to this bucket full of molten iron. It is 1600 degrees. It's 1600 degrees Celsius, about 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's incredibly hot, hot enough to melt rocks, obviously, and hot enough to melt iron, of course. And it's so bright that it's actually kind of painful to look at. But these gentlemen are going to bringing that up on stage and performing their last molten iron firework display for tonight. Wow, isn't this incredible? I'll try to get as close as possible to this display as I can bear. Don't worry, it is relatively safe. the gentleman who's actually doing the performance, he does get burnt. And I just saw this gentleman over here have a giant spark hit his jacket, but don't worry, we won't get burnt from this distance because by the time the sparks reach us, it's already cooled down. Wow. What an incredible performance. Unfortunately, this is the last firework display that we have for tonight. If you're just tuning in, you have a couple minutes left until we are finished here with this. Oh, we got lucky, we got a spark just hit me in the face. This is the 500-year-old tradition of Da Shu Hua, molten iron fireworks. And these gentlemen here are honestly incredibly brave. Despite getting multiple burns over the decades, they still continue with this pyrotechnic display. And that's why we have such a wonderful performance today. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream, whether you watched us on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter, Weibo, or our very own CGTN Live app. Thank you very much for tuning in and also writing into us. I'm your host Tianran, and I hope you tune in to another one of our CGTN Lives very soon.
欢迎大家带着一个新的朋友来我们暖泉玩。